Well, thank you, Nidu. It's cold outside, but very warm welcome to all of our members and our guests. Uh, we have a terrific program for you. Our mission is really to see how to make you, our entrepreneur members, more successful, to make your ventures more successful. And, winning customers is obviously a big part of that. Yeah. And landing the big fish, which is the Fortune 500 customers, is even more important for us. And tonight, our guide is DEEPAK Bharathan. He is Vice President of Strategic Finance and Procurement, purchasing of both services and technology globally for Comcast. And I think Comcast needs no introduction. It's a Fortune 50 company, and all of you know Comcast. I even use their internet service. And Anjan, of course, is our very own Anjan Larry. He's conducted all these wonderful programs before. He's former CEO of BirlaSoft, co-founder of Mindtree, and he has a bunch of other accomplishments as well. Well, Anjan will introduce the program and also DEEPAK, when we get started. But before turning it over to Anjan to start the program, as we customarily do, we introduce a couple of charter members or new members. And we all know the reason for doing that, in lieu of meeting people, others personally. This is a way for us to get to know our fellow charter members and be reminded about them. It's been nearly a year since we met in person. So it's just important for us to keep this community, vibrant. And that is part of the effort here. So first one to be introduced is Neha Shah. You may recall she also got our Entrepreneur of the Year award a year or so ago. So Neha doesn't need much of an introduction because of that, but her accomplishments are really remarkable. She's one of 4 co-founders, owners of GAP. And GAP is a 5,000 person global company with over 20 offices, and is approaching $500 million revenue within a predictable future. So she joined her other co-founders at the age of 22, starting early. And it was supposed to be a B2B exchange, and they've come up. She'll tell you about that herself. So with that, I'll turn it over to Neha, and after that, I will introduce Srikanth. So go ahead, Neha.
Great, nice to see everyone, and nice to see you, Raman and Neetu and Anjan, after a long time. So it feels like 10 years ago, when everything was just like a year ago we were in person, but it feels like a decade has gone by. So thank you, Raman, for that warm introduction, and I do see some other familiar faces. So I live in Princeton, not too far from where Raman is at the moment. So it is cold outside, but staying active and warm in our house with 3 young children I have, and a husband who is an orthodontist. So he gets out of the house and I stay in the house working every single day. So as Raman mentioned, my entrepreneurial story is GEP or GEP. And GEP we started over 22 years ago. I was one of the 4 co-founders at a very young age, right out of University of Pennsylvania. Was my undergrad career in Philadelphia, in the same lovely town as Comcast. And when I graduated, I became a strategy consultant. That was the original .com boom, where we were starting a B2B exchange, and quickly realized after the NASDAQ crash and September 11th that we needed to pivot. And because we were all ex-consultants, in the strategic sourcing, procurement, and supply chain space, we pivoted our company to provide both services in procurement supply chain with the likes of companies like Accenture and McKinsey, but also building a full-blown platform in the what we call the source-to-pay space, which over time, was the first kind of cloud-enabled, really truly cloud-native platform that was out there in the market. So we compete on the platform side with companies like SAP Ariba and Coupa and others. And we also have a more broader supply chain platform that now competes with the likes of course, SAP and JDA and Blue Yonders. And actually, JDA, Blue Yonders are the same now of the world. And we, like Raman said, we've grown the company. We're on track to be a billion-dollar top line in the next 3 to 5 years. We have 5,000 people, 25 global offices. The founders of the company own and operate the firm. It's a privately held company, no intent to go public or sell. Our long-term intent is to grow continue to grow a thriving business at 30 to 50% a year. And as we grow, create more profits and use those profits towards social causes that are important to each of the founders. So in my case, I spend a lot of time on social causes such as ending child labor in the world, such as bringing music and arts education to children in the slums of Ahmedabad. And then finally, most recently is just areas and a big passion of mine is kind of all forms of inequity and injustice, racial, gender, class, and otherwise. So that's a new area that I really want to expand right here locally within the United States. TIE has been a great organization to be involved with. And every time I see my fellow colleagues, I'm always inspired by all the great things that they're doing and looking forward to a wonderful talk today.
Hey, thank you, Neha. Yeah, it's just remarkable that you can, take care of the children and a husband, and although I expect he takes care of himself.
Yes, he does.
More than the kids, and also think about the children in Ahmedabad and other places, in addition to being the animating spirit of GEP. It's just remarkable. Yeah. And now I turn it over to Srikanth. And Srikanth Nistane is founder of Crave Infotech, and he's also involved in other social causes as well, including running a home for more than 50 poor and underprivileged children in India. But of course, his main shtick is running Crave Infotech, where he's the founder. They combine expertise in SAP, ERP, Zebra hardware, and along with 50 plus prepackaged apps as well. So with that, I turn it over to you, Srikanth, please.
Thank you, Raman. Congratulations, Neha. That's a huge accomplishment. I thank you, Anjan, for conducting a lot of sessions last year. You kept us warm during the year. And I think a lot of new initiatives by TIE helped us to keep this really healthy during the pandemic. It was a difficult time last year. So as Raman said, we are a relatively small and niche firm who specialize into bringing some of the newer age technology, which includes SAP, some of the stuff, RPA, AI, and machine learning, predictive maintenance we specialize in two specific areas. One is the intelligent enterprise asset management, and second is the intelligent warehouse. Life sciences energy is the core focus right now. We are SAP partners, Zebra partners, so we work around them. Glad to see, Neha, you build an organization which competes with some of the SAP products. So good. We are also, I personally like to golf and work with Aim for Seva, who is associated in providing free home service for the underprivileged students. I got involved. I didn't want to mention that we run one, but I'm glad that I was able to build and run in my village. So it's a proud moment for me to be able to give back to the village. I'm also involved in another venture. I'm a founder and board member in Heart Capital Group. Unfortunately, it's not the right time to into that business right now. It's all hospitality and hotel, but I'm glad that it's surviving after the COVID. So that's another area where I'm spending some time. I'll be happy to talk to you guys and see if there's anywhere we can create joint value and work together. I would like to get more involved, Raman, into Thai. I know I have attended a few sessions. I started in 2019, and then everything kind of started. People are not meeting, but I would be glad to get involved more. And glad to see everybody. I learned a lot from these sessions. I enjoy them. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shrikant, and all good wishes for your success. And we do have a remarkable group of people in our chapter here, in our organization, in our network, and that network keeps growing. By the way, all of you should recommend people that you think you would want to associate with and from whom you can learn as potential charter members. And in that same spirit, I'd like to just give a minute or so to Samudra Sen, who's our newest charter member, to introduce himself. I'll let Samudra introduce himself rather than me doing it. So Samudra, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Raman, and thanks, Sanjan, for introducing me to the group. Very happy to be here, and I'm fairly new to this group because I've just come to the US 2 years back. It's been about 2 years. I was in India running my company. I come from a background of education, and we, started our company in 2001 with the promise that technology will make a big difference in education one day. It's taken 20 years to prove that. When I started, EdTech was not even a mainstream concept in education. Today, of course, with the pandemic, everybody wants to go online. And everybody's kids are studying online. So we are busier than ever. My company's name is Learning Mate. You can kind of Google it up and look us up. What we do is we are a B2B business, unlike other edtech firms that you have heard of, which is like Byju's, which are B2C businesses. But we actually power a lot of universities, schools, educational institutions in the US, educational publishers. So they use our platforms. We manage their platforms, their technology. We manage their digital content, digital enablement, end to end, completely. And we've done since it's been a patient wait, as I was telling Anjan, till about 2013-14. Because nobody used to take EdTech very seriously when you told them that you could learn online. But I think the last 7 years have been extremely rewarding in our growth story. And, we've picked up our share of private equity, venture capital, all of that along the way. And primarily out of India, if you kind of look at a pure play tech services company, which does nothing else, in software except for education, we're probably one of the leaders in that space today, and growing pretty well. I'm very pleased to be here. From my personal point of view, I've spent about 2 years here. The reason I could not come earlier is I traveled here 200 times, I think 5-6 times a year, before my board kicked me out of Bombay and said, you land up here because this is our main market. So I'm here. My daughter was going to college, so I think I timed it well. And it's been very exciting at time last 2 years. I'm very pleased to be here. This is my third venture, essentially, although I'm stuck in it for a long time. I've had two other ventures which we founded and sold earlier. So I've never worked in a corporate. I'm willing to learn, what big corporations do and take away, any experience that, you guys have. So I've been an entrepreneur all my life in different molds. So very, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Samudra. Yeah, a pleasure to have you in our midst, and look forward to interacting more with you. I don't want to keep us from the main course of the evening, but I'll just give a minute to Venki, who is sponsoring the event this evening, and then we'll turn it over to Anjan. So go ahead, Venki.
Thank you, Raman. I'd be surprised if there is anyone in this room today that already does not have life insurance. And I'll also probably be mildly surprised if there is someone who does not already have some form of retirement planning already done, right? Many of you here today are entrepreneurs and corporate executives. You work hard year in and year out. Who takes the benefits? You, your family, or the IRS? So tax season is upon us, and I'd like to offer some interesting tax saving concepts and ideas to you, and that's the reason I'm here. I'm Venki Sadagopan. I'm a financial advisor with New York Life Insurance Company, and thanks Thai New Jersey and Vijay Garg for roping me in as a sponsor for today's event. Well, so I'm sure many of you are already working with a financial planner, right? I'm definitely not here to try to take their place. I offer no obligation sessions to review your financial plans and identify gaps, if any, in your retirement plans or in your life insurance product or in your tax diversified savings that you may or may not have. So in the process, if I have to, I do work with your CPAs, your attorney, or any other professional to ensure that we give you a holistic recommendation. So New York Life, as you might all know, is a 175-year-old company, right? Out of that, for 166 continuous years, New York Life has paid a dividend to all of its policyholders. It's a mutual. So combining their strength, right, the company's experience, decades of experience, and some really, really knowledgeable experts in the areas of life insurance, long-term care, annuities, securities, all of that behind me, I bring to the table the best brains and the best products in the industry, in the life insurance space. New York Life has also been recently rated #1 in its industry in Fortune's best companies in the world for 2021. So that's how rock solid a company this is. Again, what I offer is a customized approach. I can make recommendations tailored to your needs on a wide variety of protection and financial matters. It includes life insurance, college funding, retirement planning, business planning using life insurance, mortgage protection, estate planning, and leaving a legacy, and so on. So remember, the meeting is no obligation meeting, but the outcome could be invaluable. So thanks again for the opportunity. I won't stay here between you and the guests who are going to speak today, but please look out for an email with my contact information, and all I request is the courtesy of a warm response so I can meet with each of you one-on-one and discuss your financial future. Thank you.
Thank you, Venki, for this evening's sponsorship. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Anjan, I won't keep us from the main course now, so please take it away.
Thank you so much, Raman. Thank you very much, everybody. Just before I get in, just a request to everybody to, if possible, keep your videos on, because then we can, have a gallery view. I can see people. You can wave your hand. You can ask me a question. It'll be fantastic if you can. And ideally, we would have been in a room, across, but, this is where we are. I look forward to seeing people. So let me get into it. So Bharat, I am coming to you. Okay, before I come to you, all of us here about, I think, 55 or 60 of us are actually entrepreneurs. We do stuff and we work hard. And the aim of working hard is to be able to meet people like you, who's the head of, purchasing, head of procurement for a Fortune 100 company. So want to find out a whole bunch of questions. But before I get there, just a little bit about you. You have covered all the three areas. You were with Infosys in delivery. Then you moved to PA consulting for 11 years and you were in sales and account management. And then you went to the other side of the table and you became joined Comcast in purchasing. And today you run services procurement for Comcast globally, including for Sky, which is a phenomenal, this thing. So tell me, of all these experiences, which one was the most challenging for you and where did you learn the most?
Thank you, Anjan, and thank you for the warm welcome, everyone. Before I get to answering the question, Anjan, hopefully everybody's staying healthy and safe. 2020 was a tough year for all of us. I'm guessing, and hopefully 21 will be much better in every respect. So to your question, Anjan, that's a trick question, I feel, because each one of these experiences is different in its own way, right? But where learning technology, figuring out strategy, and then at the end of the day, the role that I perform right now, managing the ecosystem for a large company, all come with their own challenges. So I feel like I wouldn't do justice if I said I learned more from one role than the other. But there are different skill sets that come along with doing these different roles, which I'm sure the extraordinarily entrepreneurial group here has done that in its in their own journeys. And wearing multiple hats is sort of 101 on the entrepreneurship ladder. I haven't gotten to be an entrepreneur in the traditional sense, as in starting a company and growing it. But thanks to the different roles that I've had, I've had a lot of exposure to that ecosystem. So it's a little bit of a non-answer, Anjan.
That's fine. That's no. We'll keep getting. So tell me this. Maybe a little bit to you is, the place where you sit. And we'll try to learn something about the vendor landscape and how each of our companies can benefit from that. From where you sit, what does the vendor landscape in a company like Comcast look like? Because from outside, it's not that visible. What can you tell us?
Yeah, sure, Anjan. And that I think is the most pertinent question, which I believe this audience will be the most interested in. So, just in terms of the background, the scope that I manage for the company is, as Anjan said, is the services landscape, and everything in technology, everything in billing. So as you can imagine, Comcast is a huge company. I'm hoping most people have their internet through Xfinity. So hopefully that's working well, and everybody's been able to work remotely through these tough times. The vendor landscape for a large company like Comcast is by design extraordinarily complex, because the needs are very different from from one business unit to another, from one area to another. So that leads to what I would call as vendor proliferation, where you have an ecosystem that has literally, and there's not even an exaggeration in any way, thousands of vendors. So the role that I play and my team plays, it tends to be on two ends of the spectrum. One is, making sure that a huge company like ours is agile, is able to compete with the new age companies from Silicon Valley, because that's our primary competition set as we move to the future. So we have to be nimble, we have to be quick, and that's easier said than done in a huge company. And on the other end of the spectrum, because our legacy assets are so substantial, protecting the risk that comes along with engaging anybody else in our ecosystem is vital, as you can imagine. So it is balancing these two tasks that's the lens that we put on when we say, what kind of a vendor do we want in our ecosystem? So one big theme is around simplification of that ecosystem, which means that we want fewer vendors to keep the ecosystem manageable, so to say. But we also want innovative partners who are able to push the boundaries, which sometimes large and traditional firms may not bring to us. So that's what keeps the job interesting, right? Balancing these two often competing priorities to make sure that we're able to kind of manage the ecosystem in the right fashion.
So there are two parts, and feel free to pipe in your questions either into chat to me or just tell me that you want to ask a question and I'll give it over to you. So there are two parts. One is getting empaneled in a place like a Comcast, and obviously I will ask a lot of questions on Comcast and the empanelment. One is how to get empaneled, and the second is once you get empaneled, how to succeed. Because based on all of our experiences, my own experience, empanelment is really very difficult, but actually the easiest part. After you are empaneled, to succeed is another mess. So what is your advice on two things? One is, and you mentioned a little bit, is about risk and is about innovation, but one is empanel, and second is post empanelment. How do you succeed, and how do you it's so confusing when you walk into a large organization.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Anjan. The success, especially in our world, right? You're as good as your last project. I mean, that's pretty much how this ecosystem works, right? And I mean that not only for small or mid-sized companies, even for our large partners. If a large company who works with us does not do well on a project, that reflects poorly on everything else ahead, right? So you walk into work every day, or virtually now, given the world that we're in, and pitch up every day, right? And that's again part of the job as an effective partner for a company like Comcast. But let me answer the question in a slightly different way, Anjan, in terms of success, right? So the entry point, you're right, in some ways is easier than one would imagine, right? You just need to have a relevant product or a service. So that's a simple line, but a lot goes behind it, as you can imagine. So the pitch needs to be very, very specific, and especially for this audience, which I'm guessing focuses on certain kinds of solutions or products or services that come to market, as opposed to, say, a large outsourcing company, which could have.
So Deepak, let me just get you there. Lalit, I think you have a question which is relevant to what Deepak is just saying in terms of how does a company become relevant in your size. Lalit, go ahead. Why don't you come on video and ask your question? And Bharat, I'll give it back to you. Lalit, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm on video if you can see me.
I can see you, Lalit. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. No, but I think, so first of all, thanks for Deepak, thanks for taking the time and talking to us. This is really wonderful. As small and medium enterprises, how do you kind of navigate the world of specifically Comcast, but in general, big organization getting through and getting on board? But really also, have you seen any shifts in how companies treat small and medium enterprises when they contract them for services? As a small business owner, what I see is the demands placed on smaller sized companies in terms of all kinds of compliance and readiness postures on various dimensions are no less or no different than what you might see a big organization. Thankfully, it's become easier to deal with them. But what guidance would you have in terms of that readiness for a smaller organization? And I think you answered the question on how do you succeed? You are as good as the last thing that you delivered. So I think as long as you're able to add value, you will remain successful. I think you kind of answered that. So I'll stop there.
So Deepak, questions are coming fast and furious. So we'll try to go ahead and answer, and then I'm going to just keep firing questions at you. Go ahead, Deepak.
Sure, of course. Yeah. It's a good question. And this is the part where I put my compliance hat on, unfortunately, and remove my engineering hat for a second. Right? Managing risk is it's part of the job description, right? Especially for my team. So So the way we look at the vendor landscape is not by size, unfortunately. And I realize that's sometimes unfair to smaller companies, but it's based on the kind of work. So for instance, if somebody holds my customer data, it doesn't matter if it's a 500,000 people company or a 500-person company. I need to treat them the same way because the risk of exposure is intense, right? That's the kind of stuff that will end up on the front page of Wall Street Journal, right? So we have to abide by it. But what I would say is, to make the paperwork easy, right? I generally give the advice whenever I'm dealing with a vendor is that you just have to say yes to these kinds of things. And if you cannot, then make sure you pick a niche which doesn't require you to sign up for that kind of exposure, right? So that's where crafting your products and services as appropriate to the level of risk that you can take. That becomes extremely important.
So,
right.
Deepak, very, very good point. So question is find out a niche. So Nipunika, can I just give it to you? And you had a question on, what to do with a company which has a niche. So go ahead, Nipunika. Oh, you're on mute, Nipunika. You're on mute. Nipunika, you're on mute. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
So you talked about you also like to keep your eye on the innovations, right? And typically those will be coming from smaller size companies. So how do you go about discovering them? And how do you go about validating them? How do you track them? If not today, maybe 6 months down the road, they might be fine. So what is the process?
Yeah, it's one that keeps us busy. I'll be honest with you, because there's no easy answer, right? So forums like this are obviously a welcome addition to the market scan, I would say. But see, the primary mechanism of entry, and again, I'm speaking from the respect of, from the context of being in a technology environment, is that market innovations are easy to spot in the sense that something that dramatically changes the game in terms of something that we want to take to market. That is the lens that we adopt. Right? So usually it is the engineering team which looks out for smart and nifty products out there. Right? So that is where the differentiation aspect comes in. Right? So you said innovation. Again, not to be disrespectful to this audience, innovation can come in many forms. Right? It can come from a big company too. I don't have any illusions that only small companies can innovate. I think big companies can do it too. The question I always ask myself is, what is it that a smaller company can bring to us that a bigger company cannot? Right? It could be speed to market. It could be IP that they've developed. It could be a partnership opportunity where a bigger company may be more reluctant to give it up. So there's something different when we deal with a partner who's smaller in scale, and the risk premium that we take on, to the question that Lalit was asking before, needs to be justified, right? When we deal with that ecosystem. So I said, if you've got a product that is world beating and something that blows away some of the big product companies that we talked about earlier, fantastic. I mean, at that point, the service or the product sells itself, and that is just finding the right commercial model to work together. But often it is the case that it requires a lot of digging to get to that answer as to whether a company has got something that is truly, truly, truly remarkable, which some of our bigger partners cannot do.
So can I ask you, what do you do to find that out? What is the process?
Yeah, it's to oversimplify, it's a sandbox environment, right? So we've created a mechanism where innovative companies can create a little bit of a sandbox and demonstrate to us what is the art of the possible. Now, the challenge there is, we are even to get to that sandbox, right, there is a huge amount of filter that happens because, as you can imagine, it's a big company, so we need to manage that ecosystem very, very carefully. So we do enable that to happen. One advice I would have for everyone on this forum is make the threshold of engagement really, really easy. Right? If it requires a whole host of things to be done before we can experience the product or the service that you're providing, then there is that much more, for lack of a better term, paperwork and due diligence that we have to do before we say, okay, let's test it out. If you make it so easy that we just experience it and the product or the service speaks for itself, then the follow-on conversation becomes very easy, right? Discussing commercials is in some ways the easy part of my job, because we're a big company, so we've got the pricing power behind us to have commercial discussions. It's the other stuff that keeps me awake at night. The risk stuff, finding the right company or the partner to work with.
So,
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Nipunika. I'll just move to Mayur. You had a question which was in the same space in terms of how do companies like Comcast look at innovation and look at smaller companies? Mayur, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anjan. And Deepak, pleasure to meet you, and congrats on your success. I just have a question, right? I've been noticing more and more, speaking with different clients, Bank of America, T-Mobile, Wells Fargo, CVS, they've all opened up a dedicated supplier list for entry-level talent, dedicated technology within full stack or cybersecurity. Have you guys thought about working with organizations to pipeline out your technology talent? That way you can get more students that are coming out of universities here into your organizations that have dedicated skill sets that will be needed to grow your organization, so you could develop tomorrow's IT industry leaders.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, but I'll be a bit more nuanced about it. The challenge that I face, I've been at Comcast for a little over 4.5 years now. The challenge that I was faced with when I joined the team was that there was too much of it, of that talent stack outsourcing, if I can call it that. I mean, the mix was off. Obviously, in the junior levels, we could be doing more, and so there's a little bit of an optimization opportunity. But the reality was there was a lot that was being done within our vendor landscape as opposed to within our four walls, right? So we had to right size that a little bit. For that, there's a couple of ways in which we thought about this. One is going global. So not just having Comcast. Till about 3 years ago was an intensely US company. Our focus was all on the US market, unlike the Silicon Valley competitors that we compete with. But over the last 3 years, through acquisitions and establishing global presence, we have presence in Europe, we have presence in Asia, we have presence in India, so a number of different locations. So we have diversified the way in which we acquire talent for, sitting within our four walls. Now, back to your question around, yes, we do have junior talent programs where, we look to our partner landscape to figure out a pipeline where we can attract the right kind of talent, try them out, and potentially convert them if it works out. So there's a few things that we have done. But as I said, I mean, the brand of Comcast is strong enough that we feel, and this may be a little bit of a personal opinion here, that we can attract the right kind of talent. That hasn't been the challenge. It is about making sure that we get the talent at the right time. That's where the partners could help. So we have programs ongoing with our existing partner landscape where we have piloted a few things like that. Verdict still to be delivered. I'd say if that program can succeed at scale, but in pockets it's done really well.
So Deepak, I'll go over to Jeff, who has a question around talent and global talent. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Deepak, how are you? Nice to see you.
Hey, Jeff.
This is obviously we're faced with this now, over the last 8 or 9 months of what we've been dealing with, but we're quickly realizing that we can work from just about anywhere. And in Comcast hiring, I know there was, especially in certain organizations, there is a desire, or there has been, to keep people on site or local talent. And I think that we're learning that landscape could change a little bit, obviously. So what are you doing in your planning efforts, and are you identifying certain areas or pockets of where you can realize significant savings by offshoring?
It's a pertinent question, Jeff, and something that quite honestly, I've personally wondered over the time, even before COVID, as to what the right resource mix is and where they should be placed. And it's in some ways the same age-old question that the outsourcing industry has answered, in my view, multiple times over. 20 years ago, it was can work be delivered in a different time zone? The short answer is, of course, yes, right? And it works really, really well. Now, there is a culture and a fit for purpose element here that we need to be really sensitive to. Right? By all means, the large companies that operate in the US are very, very successful. Some companies have done this at scale. Other companies, entered the outsourcing arena a little bit later, but they found their own path. Some companies have outsourced their entire IT departments, to vendors. So, my view to this is, while I cannot talk about location strategy per se, because that's, I feel a little bit of an HR question, I can surely talk about the ambition of the company, a company like ours. And I'm pretty sure it's true for everybody out there. Right? I mean, we all work for technology companies today. I mean, you cannot, there's no bank, there is no retail, there is no, media service provider. We are all technology companies. So having core technology skill set within our four walls is fundamentally important for the long-term success of any company. So now, where those four walls are, I think is a legitimate question, right? And where we don't have the right kind of talent, where we need to augment it, from external providers, we will of course do it, and we do it at scale today, and we will continue to do it in the future as well. But it's about making sure that where do we establish presence? I'm not sure, and again, this is my personal opinion, if a completely remote model, in the way that some of the Silicon Valley companies have gone, it's something that we would embrace immediately. Maybe over time that may be something that we do. But for the immediate future, I would say the question is around where do we establish presence and grow scale there, right? Whether it's through our vendor ecosystem, whether it's through physical presence of our own offices or centers, global diversification, like the instances that I just talked about. Those are all important elements to our resourcing strategy.
So Vijay, you have a bunch of questions on risk and sort of prioritization. Over to you, Vijay.
Yeah, Deepak, thank you. So simple question, a lot of people know that none of this is permanent. Vendors are always changing. So I'd love to know about what's on your mind when you're choosing someone, whether it's staffing, outsourcing, software. Who are the vendors, like an SAP risk or a partner risk? What are the things you're looking at in different areas, and how's that changed over time as new products come out or things have changed? What are the red flags if something goes wrong?
Yeah, the last piece is actually quite easy, Vijay, in terms of the red flags. That's easy to evaluate. Project performance, the market scans of scandals happening and things of that nature, right? So that piece is it's somewhat easy. The other piece is more difficult, right? At inception, what do we need to look for? So of course we've got a very mature playbook on how we look at the vendors and all of that, but the challenge in this ecosystem is proof of the pudding isn't eating. We have to experience these partners up close to know whether they fit in, whether they add value to what we already have, significant strengths that we already have. So all of this is the more difficult part of the equation. And as I said, there's a few things that we do, like sandbox environments where we can experience somebody's services. We run obviously market exercises where we evaluate multiple vendors and things of that nature. But what I would say is, and this is a wider opportunity for the landscape. Generally, our focus has been on complexity reduction. Right? It's a complex ecosystem, and that's not true just for Comcast. It's true for every big company out there, without exception, probably. And the focus has been on complexity. How do we reduce complexity of the ecosystem and by extension risk? The innovation piece usually comes from the engineering team, and then we help drive that forward. Right? And my ambition over the last few years has been to flip that equation, where we truly act as the innovation partner, where we are able to experience partners at close range very, very quickly, getting the paperwork and all that other stuff that comes along with it out of the way very quickly, and moving to engagement, right? And then experiencing it, and if it works, great. If not, we move on. And that's easier said than done, right? And rightfully so. because working with a large company comes with its own set of risks, for a vendor, right? Liability, privacy, all of those things, which are fundamentally important to us. So, if there's one thing that the vendor ecosystem can do to make themselves more eligible for something like that is to reduce the threshold, to make sure that we can engage with you really, really quickly, experience the product or the service, and if it works, cycle back into a real engagement. If it doesn't, no harm done, right? It's a quick cycle thing, so that you don't end up wasting too much time on the sales cycle either. Which again, me personally, I feel that's also an important element, right? I mean, we're obviously talking about large companies because that's what I said, but on the other end of the spectrum, it's also, I'm acutely sensitive that there are 1,000 companies doing sales cycles with us every day, and that's a huge churn on you as well. So having a answer, positive or negative, is a good thing, and quickly.
So Deepak, in that I'll ask you a question, and Prasad, if you can unmute yourself, I'll ask you a question. So Prasad sent me so this is a small group, so I'm going to ask an uncomfortable question, and I hope that is okay. So Prasad, you sent me a private message saying that, because I said a little while earlier that, empanelment is actually the easy part. I think the more difficult part is after you get empaneled. And Prasad sent me a message, hey man, empanelment is not easy at all. I've been trying to get empaneled in Comcast for 4 years, without success. So Prasad, first my question to you and then to Deepak. So now you had Deepak explain how a small company can get empaneled. It must be very easy to work with. It must be nimble. It must have something innovative. It must have a sandbox proof of concept. So based on your own reflection, what do you think that you did incorrectly and what do you want to do in the future? And then I will request Deepak to give you some feedback.
Thank you, Anjan. What we have noticed is large clients like Comcast are always looking for something that we do out of the box, right? Something extraordinary. What do you do that is different from everybody else that is providing the same service that you do? The most challenging and common
We are
question
all normal people. We don't do anything extraordinary. We are all normal people. We just want some business. We want some empanelment.
I mean, take staffing, right? The most overrated service providers in the industry. You go to any conference, you say, what do you do? We are in staffing. They turn the other way and run as fast as possible. So given that we operate in a saturated service industry, it's even more challenging to tell how we can differentiate in staffing. We have done the best we can do in identifying the right candidates for the right positions that come across. But without getting an opportunity to provide that service, it's very hard to prove and say, hey, we can do better than the others. What I can say is wherever we have provided services to similar large organizations, they have experience with us that we have competed with some publicly traded staffing companies and we have provided better services.
Prasad, I'll hand it over to Deepak, but before I hand it over to Deepak, I think you mentioned a very important thing about time. So Deepak, this is an open conversation. So Deepak, your thing is that, is a company like Prasad's, should they spend the time somewhere else? Or should they do something else to do that? So over to you, Deepak.
Yeah, Prasad, I completely understand the question here. Right? How to differentiate? I mean, if there was a simple answer to that, I guess the world would be a whole different place, right? But in all seriousness, see, if the fundamental offering is staffing and your fundamental pitch is, we will get you smart engineers. Again, no disrespect to anybody. I mean, we have that. I mean, we do, right? And if we did not, we will get it like this, right? So that's not the issue. So you're not solving for a problem that we have, right? I think that becomes the challenge. So the way to approach that is not to say we are a staffing firm who can get you good, talented engineers who can work on, because that's what we do today, right? And that ecosystem is managed very, very carefully with a whole host of operational and financial metrics, as you can imagine. We mention it in minutia. Anytime a vendor does not perform well, right, a scorecard pops up, all of it, right? So you know how the system works. The ask is to kind of figure out a niche where we are underserved. And I'll be honest, in post-COVID world, there are very few of those instances. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, I would imagine, yeah, there were a few areas, especially given our location strategy, where we were in post-COVID, but that's not the case, especially when we have European and Asian presence today. It's a very hard question to answer. But speaking more generally, not just for Comcast, my recommendation is not to go in as a staffing company, right? Especially if you're not like a 10,000 people firm, right? That makes it really, really difficult for us to be able to sift through if that's a valuable engagement model or not. My recommendation is to figure out what we're trying to do in the market, and it's all public information, right? And so for any big company, right, it's all public information as to what our next big thing is. And figure out if that is an area that we are lacking talent in. And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it is no. And make a specific pitch aligned to that, right? That will give you traction. Again, not a sure shot way of success, but it gives you better odds, if that makes sense.
Where to save money. Prasad, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a wonderful answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So with that, Deepak, I have a question from my side. Okay. In a similar vein, because you're the head of procurement, I have nothing in this play, I can ask that question. So all of us on this screen have constantly heard of this word called vendor consolidation. All of our customers will threaten us halfway through the contract that now you're going to go vendor, we are going to consolidate. Now I have gone through vendor consolidation for 30 years. But I have never met anybody who's actually got consolidated out. Everybody will say, "Main to bach gaya is baar. I somehow survived this time." And so my question to you as head of procurement, is vendor consolidation really something to put some pressure on your all vendors, or over to you?
Come on, Anjan, you're asking for the tips of the trade. No, in all seriousness, it is a real thing. And to me personally, it is a fundamental thing. Because you often think about the company, who does it compete with? And Apples of the world, Googles of the world, products, software eating the world. You've got all of those themes that sometimes a company which has been in existence for over 50 years, like Comcast, has to compete to, right? And it's a brave new world, and we have to flex up to it. And oftentimes, I feel that it is not the capability or the talent, because we've got the best of the best. And I can say that, having come through my consulting career, where I've seen, umpteen number of companies, we've got the best of the best in terms of talent, special technology talent. The nimbleness is often, hampered by the complexity in the ecosystem. Sometimes it's a big company red tape, that comes along with it that we have to battle against. But insofar as the one that I have control over, it is the vendor ecosystem. It is complex. It is complex because everybody's fighting for the same kind of work. Right? Two different business units make two different decisions on exactly the same kind of thing that needs to be done, for the entire company, and that slows us down. Right? So it's a real material impact on P&L. So that's something that I feel strongly about. So I would kind of rephrase that as, it's not consolidation per se. Of course, there's consolidation comes along with it, but it is simplification of the landscape. How do you engage more simply? And if the right answer is one vendor can do it all, which is not, from my experience, that's not the right answer, because that will just create a gorilla on one side of the fence, and which doesn't serve either the client or the vendor well, in my experience. So often it is figuring out the right engagement model to work. Sometimes it is just getting a smart engineer from a staffing firm. That's perfectly fine. And we can go out to an umpteen number of companies to do that. Sometimes it is to get specialized IP from some vendor who has done this specific thing at some other customer. So that's the evaluation that we have to go through.
Absolutely. That's, one of my biggest learnings is the whole old Satyam story, where the companies were loyal to Satyam, while the company, Satyam as the company disappeared, the purchasing departments held on to the resources of Satyam because there's so much of stickiness. So we have about 5 minutes left. Want to get into the future a little bit. And Asim, you have a question on sort of what is the 5G impact, and then Supreet, I'll move to you. Asim, go ahead. Okay, so it's a question from Asim is, with 5G around the corner and popping up of streaming services, how is Comcast planning to compete? So I'm sure you are hearing a lot about 5G. I mean, we are all reading about it, but is it a really game changer? And is it something next 6 months, next 2 years, next 5 years? How should we as consumers look at it?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing, one silver lining from the COVID experience for all of us, it is a recognition of how fundamentally important the broadband infrastructure is, for the country, for the economy to run properly. So yes, I mean 5G, I would call it, yeah, it's a game changer. Where the broadband experience was not what we wanted to be for our customers, right, as in Comcast. But some of you might have heard this from the tech forums. What's better than 5G? 10G, right? So we've got our branding on a technology spectrum is that it's 10 gig up, 10 gig down, right? So this doesn't happen overnight, Anjan, in my view, right? I never say never, right? I mean, you always have to embrace whatever the market throws at you and figure out how you compete. But in some ways we're ahead of the curve, right? We've got an Xfinity Mobile offering, which has a network sharing arrangement with another large provider. So we have the 5G spectrum. If we wanted to kind of so I'll say it's very well thought of, our future strategy. But the fundamental broadband experience of having your home connected, low latency, the network that supports it, the billions of dollars of infrastructure that stands behind it, very, very hard to replicate. Let me put it that way.
No, absolutely. Hey, Supreet, you have a question quickly, and then I have a final question. Supreet, go ahead.
Thanks, Anjan. So my question is not related actually to what everybody's been discussing, but more about what's in the future. So especially given the COVID uncertainty, what's your view on the 2-year outlook on the outsourcing industry landscape overall? What do you think the next 2 years is going to look like?
Yeah, it's a good question, that one that keeps my team awake at night, thinking about how to get ahead of the curve. So this is not by any means a well thought out response, because it's an answer that we're still developing. But I'll kind of give you two themes to this. The post-COVID world, essentially what that means is remote working, location, geopresence, discussions that have been going on for 2 decades have suddenly become front and center of every CIO's mind. Right? Every single vendor, large or small, is thinking about where do I hire talent from and how do I hire talent from, and does it have to be in Silicon Valley or the tri-state area? It can be anywhere now, right? So this, in my view, there'll be 2 trends that emerge. One is you've seen some of these big IT outsourcing deals that have happened, with the outsourcing majors, right? So Dell McKiser did that, Vanguard did it recently. So large scale movement of the IT talent, within the ecosystem, right? So large deals signed, lots and lots of savings. So it's savings first sort of a view, and where we keep the core innovation and product in house and everything else is outsourced, right? So that has accelerated. So that is one outcome of this thing. On the other end of the spectrum is that more and more CIOs are thinking, now I can build a better mousetrap. Why do I need the vendors now that, especially if you are from a company which has the brand presence and the pull to attract the talent, no matter where they're situated, why not? Right? So strong brands, I put all my Silicon Valley competitors in the same bucket, just like Comcast and NBCU and Sky in the same bucket. We can attract talent, right? So does that mean we build our own, centers where we do technology work? Traditionally, that was done by our partners. I guess the answer is somewhere in between, right? Like with everything in life, the answer will end up somewhere in between. But I think companies will take different trajectories. Right? There are some big moves in the market that are happening. A couple of examples that I just mentioned. They're one end of the spectrum, right? But then you'll see like centers or geopresence discussions popping up very, very quickly across the technology industry as to why do we need a big center in New York, or for that matter, why do we need a big center in Bangalore or Chennai, right? Why not other cities? So these are all discussions that have been happening for the last 2 decades, but now they're very real, right? And some significant decisions which will alter the trajectory of how the industry moves will happen in the next 24 months. That's my view.
I think we are on the top of the hour, so I'll ask a couple of last questions and pass it over to you, Deepak. So when Deepak and I were, Raman, Deepak and I had a couple of calls, planning for this, and one of the things that Deepak, you most graciously said, when we requested you to come and speak, you said, giving back, being part of the community, etc. Because obviously a lot of people want to reach out to you to get your advice. So the question to you, Deepak, is, many people want to get some guidance from you. Could you be available? Would you be available? How could one, informally, get some feedback, advice from you? What is your steer to us around that?
Yeah, sure. I guess that's a great way to end the conversation as well. It's very inspiring to see the group that's out here, and it's everybody's self-made, and despite the busy lives that all of us lead, the fantastic give back to the society is just fascinating and inspiring. So Anjan, thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to talk to this great audience. So on your question, Anjan, so I'm happy to serve as a sounding board for anyone. That's not the issue. So feel free to reach out. I think the pertinent question is, how do you make the most use of the engagement that you have with me or anybody else in the industry who's on the procurement strategic finance side? And to me, there's only one way to describe it: make it relevant. If that's not the case, it is just a difficult proposition, because you would not find a big Fortune 50 company which is not well served by its vendor base. Right? If that happens, somebody's not done his job well. Right? So that's not the problem. Right? Usually, the executive team is looking for something that the vendor can bring that does not happen in our ecosystem currently, or happen well in our ecosystem. That does require homework. That does require you to understand our strategic business priorities, as well as where we could have gaps to make the conversation relevant. And usually, the entry channel is not just one way. Engineering teams, they're smart engineers. An executive with the engineering team, she may bring out a new opportunity, a new vendor to us, or it could be the other way around. And I may bring something. So that happens, but usually the span of attention is 30 seconds. You know how the world works. And unless it is relevant in 30 seconds, it becomes really difficult, right? You'll just be, okay, why cannot I do this with one of the big vendors that is already working with me? That is the first question I ask myself. And if I don't have a strong answer to it, it's very hard for me to put that email or introduction further than that, right? It's just another potential partner. In some ways it's brutal, but the philosophy that I've adopted in my life is that it better be brutally honest than waste somebody's time.
Then honestly brutal.
Yes.
Deepak, it's been a fascinating conversation. Raman, may I request you to, come in and just share some reflections? Raman, over to you.
Thank you, Anjan. I find it very useful. It is, I frankly didn't have an appreciation for the vendor ecosystem and where that was heading. And, this is just terrific. I didn't realize also the base question that you asked, which is, hey, what can you do that a large company with whom I already deal with and am familiar with won't be able to do. Yeah, because that's a risk mitigation strategy for you. It just makes good sense. So, and then the other suggestion I thought was very good, which is how do you differentiate yourself? How do you serve a need that I have, which is outstanding? And how can you create a sandbox for yourself? So, those two things really resonated with me. And I just want to thank you, Deepak and Anjan, for this wonderful program. It's very illuminating. Thank you. And I will now just, Deepak, if you have any final comments, I'll turn it over to you. And then I will close it after that with just a message for our own members.
Raman, thank you for that. And as I said earlier, it is fascinating and fantastic to interact with everyone here. My objective was, it's not like I've got a treasure trove of information or knowledge. That's not the case. It's a dual process, right? How the question I always ask myself is, how can I make myself and my company more relevant to the ecosystem that works with me? Right, just like I'm sure all of you ask the same question as to when you interface with clients. So it's fascinating, right, to at least understand the questions and the kinds of things that the folks here are thinking about. That gives me food for thought. And again, thank you, Anjan and Raman.
Well, we can give you more food for thought, but I don't want to inundate you with dozens of emails that you would have to respond to. So Anjan and Neetu, let's just give it some thought in terms of how we can approach this. And it may be that we could perhaps set up an advisory panel or something, and then maybe Deepak or Anjan, you could suggest a couple of other people, and then we could direct the questions to the panel and let someone from the panel just respond to those. So let's give it some thought, Anjan. You've done such a terrific job, getting everybody into the conversation and addressing central issues. Thank you very much. And I will not take up more time because we're already 8 minutes over. But a couple of just 2 points. One is the value of the network is increasing. Neetu, thank you for bringing in interesting new members. And you can increase the value of the network even more if each one of you who is a charter member or who attended this event today, if you suggest just one name of an interesting person you would like to associate with and from whom you might learn something, if you could do that and forward it to Neetu or Anjan or me, that'd be great. That would be appreciated. The second thing is that we have very interesting programs, and we'll communicate to you through the grapevine. But meanwhile, I just want to let you know that in conjunction with Entrepreneurship Week, which is coming up, we will have a special rate for membership renewal. So just watch out for the notice on that and be sure to take advantage of it. Yeah? And, Neetu will find it rewarding if you could, during that period, renew your membership. Very important. So I urge you to do that. Both Anjan, Neetu, Vijay, Sri, they've been doing fascinating work all year long. So please do that as soon as you get that notice from Neetu. So thank you all, and keep safe, keep warm, be well, and thank you again, Anjan and Deepak.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.